The West Philippine Sea Newsletter, Volume 10. Philippine Congress passes the Maritime Zone Act and is now on President Marcos' desk. Since early this year, the Philippine Congress has been debating a new bill, the Maritime Zone Act. This act is now on the desk of Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., awaiting his signature. The new bill has received generally popular support in Congress with unanimous approval in the Senate. Despite the bill not being explicitly mentioning China, China's diplomatic protest to the Philippines followed its first version passage in February 2024. The Maritime Zone Act codifies the 2016 ruling by the Hague's Arbitration Court. The court ruled against China and for the Philippines over Chinese novel claims in the West Philippine Sea that were China's attempt to deny the Philippines sovereignty in their internationally recognized exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. What does the making of this bill into law provide for the Philippines? If the Maritime Zone Act becomes law, it will basically codify the Hague's ruling against China in 2016 into Philippine law. The 2016 ruling was in the Permanent Court of Arbitration and could not rule on the sovereignty issues because China did not agree to participate in the proceedings. The case focused on China's claims to their 9-line maritime features, which they used to create dubious historic claims to sovereignty over the near entirety of the South China Sea, including the West Philippine Sea. The court found that China's claims of the 9-line had no legal foundation, and its activities, including illegal fishing and island construction, were a violation of Philippine sovereign rights as internationally recognized by the United States Convention on the Law of the Sea, which China is a signatory. China refused to recognize the ruling and has continued its illegal activities in the South China Sea. The question arises, if China ignored an international tribunal's finding, why would they comply with a Philippine national law that codifies into Filipino law a ruling that China already ignores? We doubt that China will comply with the Philippine law as it did with the tribunal ruling. Signing the act into law will remove some legal obstacles, enabling the Philippines to take action against China. Since China refused to participate in the Hague ruling, it is not a legally binding agreement. As a result, the Philippines likely lack the necessary domestic legal enforcement mechanism to attempt to enforce its claims through law enforcement, such as the Coast Guard. The proposed law does give the Philippines the right to enforce their EEZ and issue up to a $1 million fine for each violation. Therefore, it would empower the Filipino courts and law enforcement to enforce violations of their EEZ. As this being stated, and the Philippines is proposing a law that is based on international law and is basically a non-binding ruling based on international maritime law, how is the Philippines going to try to enforce this new law? Will they demand the dismantling or confiscation of Chinese artificial islands in the Philippine EEZ, such as the Hughes Reef, a militarized island China created to support its illegal claims? It is doubtful that China will comply with the Philippines Act if it becomes law. In the short term, it is likely to become more bellicose towards the Philippines and may abandon its current arrangement at the Second Thomas Shoal, which allows resupply of the Sierra Madre without harassment, as long as Philippines provide advance notice of the resupply missions. Even though the Philippines could enforce this act against China, it appears that they do not intend to do so due to China's relative strength in the region. However, it could serve to prevent any new Chinese constructions, such as on the Scotus Shoal, by empowering the Coast Guard, the Philippine Coast Guard, and requesting assistance from its allies, such as Japan or the United States. This is likely another move by the Marcos government and its supporters to draw attention to the illegal actions of the Chinese in the West Philippine Sea and continue their media campaign against China, which has been successful in highlighting China's illegal and aggressive actions in the region. Otherwise, the more neutral ASEAN nations, who met earlier this month in Laos to try to diffuse tensions in the region, might perceive the proposed law as a provocative and escalatory, interpreting its Philippines' inflaming regional tensions, despite the fact that it is just reiterating the correctness of the tribunal ruling over Chinese illegality. The Maritime Zone Act, for the most part, will have no real impact on the region other than adding some additional Chinese inflammatory claims and threats. The Philippines will not have the ability or desire to enforce this law, particularly in relation to the illegal artificial islands the Chinese have created and occupied. The advantage lies in its reinforcement of Philippine sovereignty claims, which the Chinese are violating as part of their ongoing media campaign. Perhaps more importantly, it codifies and domestically internalizes the sovereignty rights outlined in the 2016 ruling. President Marcos stated that one of his goals was to demonstrate to the Philippine people what China's actions do to their legal rights. This law will reinforce that and make it the Philippine law after his presidency, and it will enshrine the tribunal's ruling into Philippine law if it is signed.